With me today from the Tribeca Film Festival short, They Grow Up So Fast, is director John F. Beach. I may try to put the F in there. Thanks for joining me today, John, and congrats on landing the film at the year's biggest film festival. That's a story indie filmmakers dream of. What was your reaction when you found out?
I was beside myself. I got a call from Sharon Badal. It's been, gosh, a couple of months ago. Wasn't really expecting that. It came out of the blue. It was a New York number that I didn't have, and a lot of times I won't pick those up. And I did, and it was her. I was so thrilled. It's so fun to be able to tell, your cast and crew and everybody involved that you got into a festival sort of at that level. So it's exciting and still sort of basking in the glow, kind of just coming from there.
Absolutely. What was some of the feedback that you got about the film from viewers, critics, people who attended?
It was great. We had three screenings, originally. Those sold out in like an hour when the tickets went
Oh,
on sale a while back. So they actually added a fourth screening on the Sunday night, the final night of the entire festival. I think we may have been the final thing showing at Tribeca, our
not
block.
bad.
And there was a press and industry screening as well. So five total. They were all a little bit different, but I was so excited to be a part of when we first got the email, it said you're a part of the batshit crazy block, but it was sort of a couple of the letters bleeped out, and we didn't know, it didn't say short film blocks. We were like, is that what it means? And that was so fun because it was I was kind of saying, a collection of like-minded misfits that have a similar dark sense of humor as myself. And so I think the audiences, knew the type of films they were coming to see, and the screenings tended to be a little bit later at night. But it was really fun. The reaction was incredible, in the screenings, lots of laughs and oohs and ahs throughout our short and all of them. And it was really special.
I think
Uh,
that was my favorite category of the shorts this year. And I did think that they all had a nice sort of interconnected theme, even though they were all sort of batshit crazy. They also had this a lot of time jumps and a lot of kind of playing with time loops. I thought it fit in well with the theme.
yeah, it was really, really fun.
Yeah,
Um,
how did it feel to see, you work on this project, it's kind of like your baby, you bring it from inception to putting it on the screen. What was it like seeing that on the big screen in front of industries, critics, top minds, fans? Where is it kind of like nerve-wracking a little bit?
Absolutely. And, this was our New York premiere, but we had our world premiere in my hometown in
Right.
Shreveport, Louisiana, where we filmed. And then we had played several festivals leading up, and I tried to go to as many as I could. And then there's something different, honestly, when you get into, a festival like Tribeca in a city like New York. I would be lying if I said I didn't have some new, butterflies leading up to it and excitement. But we have a lot of friends in New York, and then cast and crew that came in. My fiance, who plays Amy in the film, Emily Althouse, when we met back in 2014, she actually lived in New York, up in Harlem. So we spent time going back and forth. And, eventually I won the tug of war and brought her out to Los Angeles. But there's so many friends there. And so it was really special. But yes, nerve-wracking. It doesn't matter how many times you see it, especially when making a comedy. I've seen it so many times and in so many different forms while we're editing, and we were there when we filmed. But through the editing process, you become, I think, desensitized to the comedy somewhat. And it's not until you get in a theater full of people where you start to hear, this is working, they're getting it, little moments that we obsessed about in the edit, like the timing is working. And it's also really fun because as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit different in each screening. And there's, sometimes people laugh at one thing and that doesn't strike the other audience as funny. Other times people might laugh so hard at a joke that they miss a little thing that we thought was going to be funny right after that. And it's different every time. And I think that's what's so much fun about seeing comedy on the big screen with an audience. It's something that, I think we're all fighting to kind of keep that experience alive. And it was tough during the pandemic that it went
Sure.
away. And, a lot of people are watching stuff at home, but for me, I just don't think you can replace or replicate that experience.
That experience, that group experience in a theater. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
It's just something that brings everyone together. Strangers, you're laughing together over something. You find that common thread, and we don't get that at home. You mentioned your fiance. Was she always in your mind for this co-starring role, or did you go back and forth with that?
She was always my choice for the role. In fact, we were supposed to shoot this in 2020, in the spring of that year. I first had the idea in 2019, and we started to ramp up to go film in Louisiana in 2020. The pandemic hit, and we had to scrap everything. Then I tried to do it again in the summer of 2021, but Emily had booked a TV show that was filming in Chicago, and she was there most of the year. We tried to sneak it in a weekend in between, but it just didn't come together. So finally, everything came together, with her being available. And I don't think I could have gone another direction as much as she's had to listen to me obsess about the script and talking about it all. And she was such a big help. And, on that front, it honestly was a thing that I had specific people in mind. Some of my closest friends and collaborators, my producer Martin Spangers, who also plays 19-year-old Jack and 29-year-old Jack in the film. He's got the sort of makeup on with the guitar, and then he hands me the
That's my favorite scene. It cracked me up when you came and kind of held up your 6-minute-old teenage son with a pizza cutter. I was laughing so hard.
Oh, so fun. And we've collaborated on the past on a number of projects, and but he's busy. My cinematographer is a guy named Damian Drake, who's an old college friend of mine, who is so busy as a director and cinematographer in his own right. Our editor, Aaron Himmelstein, who also co-produced, is so busy. Ended up being available to come down to Shreveport and do it. My production designer, Andrew Boffinger from New Orleans, drove up. All of these people are they're so busy working on things. And I thought maybe I'm going to end up with two out of these, key people that I've really wanted to work with. And they were all available. We snuck it in and shot for 3 days in a 105-degree heat wave in Louisiana, and we're off to the races. But yeah, I always had Emily in mind, and all of those key positions, and it just worked out, which was really fortunate.
It really did. When I was watching it, I felt like it was the perfect mashup of funny and traumatizing. And in a lot of ways, traumatizing can be funny. You kind of have to make light of things. And I felt like Brian, your character, he was just trying to harness chaos long enough to survive the next second, the next minute. Talk about where that idea came from. What inspired you to sit down and write this?
So in November of 2019, my younger sister, who's 13 months younger than me and is just my best friend in the world, had her first son. And Emily and I flew home, and we were there for his birth, little George Beach Alexander. And it just kind of brought up this feeling that I think I have, which is, I'm 45. At the time I was 41, I think. And it always feels like, oh, really? You're having kids like already? Like that's something people do way down the road. And, I have friends that have kids graduating college, and my sister, was having her first child at 40 and was just so grateful and lucky to be having a child. But it just brought up what are clearly my anxieties about, having kids, not having kids, all of that. And so a writing partner of mine at the time, John Hogue, and I pitched it to him and some of the key kind of points. And it's funny, Emily had worked on another short film not long before that, where she had played a pregnant character and ended up with the pregnancy belly, which we still have. And, you just start thinking as a filmmaker, like, well, we have this. So what if you're pregnant, and you walk in but it started with, the birth of my nephew, who we call Beach, by the way.
Oh.
And he actually is in the film, and he plays, there's a scene where, I put a smaller, about a 1-year-old baby into a crib, and then I go over to the door, and then we whip back, and he's just instantaneously grown up to he was 2.5 at the time, but that's my nephew, little Beach. And so, it was really special in that his birth was sort of the inspiration for the idea. My anxieties, which I always try to craft into dark comedy to sort of deal with them. But for him, if we had shot in 2020, he would have been just the little, baby that I was handing off if we had still done it that way. But because of the delay, he grew up to just about the cutest possible age he could have been. And, we coaxed a few little lines out of him, and then he went home, and Emily played the other side, and I just reacted to what we remembered him saying. And it was really, really fun.
That's a nice little family memory for you guys to have. And I have to ask, what did your sister think of it? Did she think it was a legitimate representation of parenting? And has your idea of parenting changed now that you've gotten to the other side of this?
It's really interesting. First of all, my sister came on, and she executive produced the film with us. So she was there and with us on set, and, was a huge part. I thought, I'll go back home and shoot something in my hometown, and that'll be easy. And I haven't lived there since I was 18 years old, and I didn't know what I was getting into. It's not easy to not be in the city that you live in, trying to make something. And so not only was she incredible in that respect, but yeah, I mean, there's the family aspect to it. And I think she was so thrilled to be able to see Beach on the screen. And we captured like a little moment in time that we'll always have of him at, again, such a cute age. As far as me, this was all my imagination. As I mentioned, it was born out of my anxieties. And so, when you watch it, you'll see where I even played we kind of pushed it towards like a Twilight Zone and wanted it to feel like a thriller. But very much in my mind, it was sort of the horrors of maybe not being ready, but having this thrust upon you. And certainly I think it struck a chord more universally. And we've had I've been so pleased with the response from parents who see it that are like, oh, it does go by so fast, and it's so funny because it just feels like that. And I don't have firsthand experience of that. I do have a lot of nieces and nephews. And so in some respects, living in Los Angeles and being far away from most of them, you sort of catch up with them in snapshots like that.
Right.
But it, yeah, I think we captured something that I'm really proud of. And you brought up something before of him being kind of trapped at each turn.
Yeah.
And our film now is 9 minutes and 48 seconds is its running time. And there was a version that was about 13.5 minutes. And it just, our editor, Aaron Himmelstein, who I mentioned before, kept feeling like we could push it down towards, 11. And I was like, I don't know, and then we would get in there and work and, get to new cuts that like felt more claustrophobic. And then what we latched onto was the idea that it has to feel like Brian cannot get out of the house. If you give him a lot of what went away, were walking from room to room, which, I think in filmmaking in general, that's the stuff that hits the cutting room floor a lot of times. But in this, it started to really take shape as this fast-paced, every time he turns, he's sort of trapped by a new obstacle that doesn't allow him to leave until he takes a little break for the pizza. But otherwise, he's stuck there,
The pacing it made the viewer feel like we were kind of in Brian's shoes, that we thought it was a breathless feeling. Every turn, everything was different. And, I have to ask, because we talked about my favorite scene, which I thought was hysterical, kind of gave a break for a second where, he was meeting his teenage son and he was like, give me that. I had to laugh at that. It was the first kind of breath I even took as a viewer, and Brian did a little bit as well. What scene turned out so well when you were filming it that it would end up being your favorite that maybe I'm not thinking about right now, but you really love that scene?
Which one for me?
Yeah, for you.
I'd probably go back to the scene with my nephew, with little Beach in the crib, and it's because of the way we had to film that. He came in, he was first up on our second day of filming out of 3 days, and we had all of our crew hide in the house except for our cinematographer and our sound recordist, who were waiting in the room with the crib, that room in the house where we were filming. And then Emily and we went and we took Beach from his parents, brought him in, and sat down, and we just kind of talked. The camera was rolling but pointed at the ground, nothing's going on. And then Emily picked him up and said, like, do you want to get in the crib? And we kind of put him in there. And it's interesting, the first thing he said is in the film, he's like, I want to get out, and he sort of starts to, and then, our cinematographer, Damien, picked up the camera. He's worked with children a lot in other shoots, and he was fantastic. And I knew if I could get him to say, yes, no, mama, dada. He was saying poopy and change my diaper a lot at that time. And so we knew we'd just get those, but it was a trick because all he wanted to do was look up at the boom mic or into the camera. So it was about trying to get him, and we got a few moments of him talking to me, but we didn't really I had some loose dialogue written for what the other side of that scene could be, but we knew we were going to get what we get and then have to do it on the fly. So we worked with him, and then we did the whip pan over to him, and that was really tricky. We only got one where he would actually looked at me and stayed there, and it works so beautifully, I think. But he was there 15 minutes in the morning, and then they took him, he left, our crew came back in, we turned the camera around, and Emily kind of stood behind the crib where he would be, and we just had a list of all the things he had said, and then I sat there doing anything I could think of, improvising the other side of this conversation. And I will say this, we shot so much of that side that it was one of the hardest scenes for us to edit, because there were so many combinations of like, what do we want this to be? What's the conversation that they're going to have? How do we make it funny and light? And like, I wanted it to also be a little irreverent. I think that plays funny, which we didn't do any of that with him there. And so just because of the challenge of that scene in particular, and not knowing really until we got in the edit what the possibilities even were, when I see it now and the reaction that it gets, in with an audience, I think everybody is tickled, at least in the screenings we've had so far, in that reveal. And yeah, it's that one's really fun, and it's always a special moment, and also just because he's family, he's my nephew, and
he's family, yeah. And they say, what do they say? Never work with animals and kids because it's so difficult. It helps if you're related to them, because you already have that kind of rapport with them. Maybe makes it a little bit easier. You have a little more patience as well to get the shots.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Shreveport. We have to talk about Film Prize, because congrats to that. You got a top prize, $50,000 for the short at Louisiana's Film Prize in 2021. 22? 22.
That was 2022. That was last year.
2020, last year. So what were some of the challenges you faced getting this made in time for Film Prize? Because I know you were, with the pandemic and everything, you were kind of racing against the clock there.
Oh, well, things kept happening with, I mentioned all the people's schedules I was, working around, and it pushed us to the last weekend in June of 2022 when we were filming. And not only were we dealing with a heat wave, but what that did is it put us up against the Film Prize is really incredible. And it happens in a couple of stages. Everyone goes and films in Louisiana, preferably in Caddo Parish, where Shreveport is located. And then there's an initial deadline for rough cuts, which I believe last year might have been July 12th. So we shot the last weekend in June, and that gave us just about, I think it was exactly 2 weeks to edit a rough cut together. Our editor, Aaron, he was on set. And so that helped. He was there making sure we got what we needed, but also kind of starting to put a rough assembly together. But then we came back to LA and had 3 days with him. And then he had a vacation plan with family and was like on a boat in the ocean somewhere, editing and sending us cuts. And I would put together just, crazy amounts of notes and send back. But that's how we communicated to push us towards a rough cut, just to get that turned in, because then you're vying to get into the top 20 of the film prize. And that's what they narrow it down to. And those are the films that compete in October for the actual prize. So that was a huge challenge. Then, you go to work, that was rough sound, rough color, temp score. Some of the scenes were still rough around the edges. They weren't finished, but we felt like it was enough and it showed the spirit of what we were making. But we had a lot of work to do. And so then we spent the next, I think we had another 2 months or so before the final cut was due. And these are hard deadlines with the film prize. Like if you miss the rough cut deadline, you don't compete that year. If you miss the final deadline, they screen your rough cut. And if you have temp sound and things that aren't licensed, that's a problem. And so like really missing those is not an option. And so it was a lot of work. It was crazy. There was a lot of pressure, but I think it brought out, everyone's creativity in a way that was really, really exciting. And, we were all exhausted and I think ready to, take a break from each other for a bit, but now
art imitates life, because the art was a little chaotic. Everything's going at a fast pace, and then everything was going at a fast pace to get it, to film prize.
That's right. Yeah, it definitely did that, and I think it comes across. But that's very much how it felt filming it. But again, that's where the benefit of having people that and trust. And again, my producer Martin Spangers is somebody I've worked on 4 or 5 projects with, and there's a shorthand with us. I know all of the things that he can do and do well in post-production, where they're technical things that are not my specialty, and having all these collaborators with me and by my side really made it possible, and was lucky to have all of them. And it worked out. And
it was in your hometown. Your friends, your family could come. How was that reaction to be able to show your work to your hometown? What was their reaction? How was your reaction to all the congratulations you got when you won that $50,000?
That was incredible. My sister, Gay Nanette Beach Alexander, who, executive produced, as I mentioned, she sort of discovered the film prize, and was telling me about this. And I had made other films, short films, web series, and I did most of that in Los Angeles. And she was like, why, there's this amazing thing, like you should come make something here. And she had been pushing me for close to a decade to come make something. And it's just hard to travel and bring everyone in to make something. And I didn't know the creative community there yet because I'd been gone so long, but I did start going in town and going to watch the films at the film prize, and was blown away. There's an amazing community there. And I saw some of the winners and was blown away, and saw what their films went on to do, play Tribeca, play festivals, all over the country and all over the world. And it just seemed like this amazing thing that I wanted to, get involved in. And it was so frustrating when we were right about to go do it, and then it all fell apart. But to get to go do it in 2022, and then to make the top 20, and then get to go screen there. And it's not like other festivals where, Tribeca was unique in that we got to screen 4 times with an audience. A lot of festivals, you might screen, once, maybe there's a second screening, sometimes a third, but that's exceedingly rare. At the film prize, they show 2 blocks of 10 films each, and they play them in 5 or 6 different venues around town. And they play them for 3-4 days. over and over. And everyone, in order to vote, you have to see both blocks of films. You have to have seen all 20 to vote. So you can't just go select the one
Go
that
to
you're
your favorite.
And so you really sense that the community, thousands and thousands of people are coming out and get to see your work. And Gregory Kallenberg, who runs it, does such an amazing job, and the whole team down there, as far as like what they do for the 20 filmmakers and teams of filmmakers that come in for this. It's just like a big party in downtown Shreveport. And, a few of the venues are down there, including the Robinson Film Center, and like audiences are just coming out, and you're down there, and there's events, and everyone is there. And for me, it was, it's going to be hard to replicate that, no matter, what this career goes on to bring. Honestly, like that feeling of being there with family and friends. I had cousins and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews come in for it. And it's, it's incredible. You're in a movie theater filled with people that you know and love, and they're getting to see something that you made there in town for something that is, has been created to sort of foster and celebrate the independent filmmaking community there. And I can't say enough about the Louisiana Film Prize. It's a special thing. I want to keep it secret, but it's too important for that area. And I also just I want to tell filmmakers everywhere, if you're making a short film, I mean, look it up, research it. If it's, within your means to get down there and film in that town, it's incredible. I mean,
And don't sleep on these smaller town film festivals, because they're really doing a lot. I talked to someone about Bentonville. They're doing great things. There's fantastic smaller film festivals around to get your work out, and then get to Tribeca. I have to ask you, now that you did the film prize, you went to Tribeca. What was, outside of your film showing on the big screen, what was your most memorable experience of Tribeca? Was there something you saw, or someone you met, or feedback that you got that just made that experience even more fantastic?
Wow. I mean, there's so many things. I feel like, I have to say, there was a director's brunch on the first Monday of the festival. And I got to go there, and I had already met a few of the filmmakers. We had screened once in our block, the filmmakers in our block, and we were walking around looking for a seat. There were a lot of tables in this big venue, and there was one table that was reserved, and we were like, I mean, there are a bunch of these reserved. Like, who is it reserved for? Like, can we just sit here? And then, we thought better of it and went and found a table, and then, next thing I know, they're introducing, Robert De Niro to come walk up and speak to the filmmakers of this year's Tribeca. And he got up from that table, and I was like, I'm so glad that we didn't just sit down in Robert De Niro's seat and inevitably would have been told to get up and move, which would have been so embarrassing. But he got up and spoke, so graciously about the filmmakers at this year's festival, and what Tribeca is all about. And, it's a festival founded in the wake of 9/11, and, partly to revitalize a part of a great American city. And, that's really special. And I was struck at that time. I thought back to, I graduated college in 2000. I was in Dallas, Texas at the time, and I worked for a year and didn't have the courage to, dive into filmmaking and acting. And then in 2001, I quit that job, and I did. And I took on odd jobs in Dallas, and I started taking improv and acting classes and making short films and meeting this creative community that were sort of the beginnings for me on this journey. And then 9/11 happened, a couple of months later. And that sort of, as I'm sure it was for so many people, was like a paradigm shift in the way I think about life and the world,
Sure.
and what I wanted to do with my life. I had sort of turned away from pursuing pre-med the year before, and weirdly, it sort of solidified my desire to pursue the arts and to pursue this thing that I love. And I wasn't entrenched enough or educated enough about the film industry at that time to be aware of what was happening with Tribeca being founded. And, but you become aware of it, and it's grown into this, incredible monumental thing. And so, yeah, to be invited there over 20 years later was special. And to be sitting there, listening to one of the founders among all of the other wonderful people that spoke was a pretty incredible moment.
Founders and one of the legends of our time. And I can just imagine your thought when you saw him stand up from that table, like, oh my gosh, I am so glad I did not get asked to move by the Godfather himself.
Yeah, would not have been a good look.
That would have been a good look. So what's next for you, John? Are there more film festivals in your future this year, or are you done with this season, or are you working on another project that we can look out for?
We have several film festivals we've gotten into coming up. I have to be careful because they're like 5 or 6, and some we can't announce yet, some we can, but we're having we're playing a couple here in Los Angeles, LA Shorts International and Salute Your Shorts. I think those are the only 2 I can talk about now. Indie Shorts in Indianapolis, which we're very excited about, also in July. There are a few others coming up. I've gotten it out there to a lot more that we're waiting to hear from. So we're kind of on this journey with this short right now, and trying to go when we can to as many as we can, because it's so much fun, and you start to see filmmakers that you've already met again. And then I have a few projects, irons on the fire, that I'm trying to kind of push uphill, but the one that's taking the forefront is adapting this into a feature film, and so that's something that I've been developing. And obviously, nothing to do at the moment. There's a strike happening, and you stand side by side with everyone in that fight. But it's something that I hope to be able to do, and I feel like we've got an exciting showpiece for sort of what we could do with a feature film. And yeah, that's very much my plan for next steps.
Yeah, I think that this is a perfect concept to expand into a feature film. That rush and that pace, if there's breaks in between, I could totally go for it for an hour and a half. I felt really at the end of it, I thought, gosh, this was you could tell if you put your heart and soul into it. And for me as a viewer, I really felt like I was a part of that whole thing as I was watching it. And yeah, I like films like that. So I wish you the best on that. I really do hope you expanded into a full length.
Well, thank you so much. That's the plan, and I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, that's always thrilling for me as a filmmaker, and for our whole team, cast and crew. That's all you can hope for, is that people.
That's all you can hope for. Well, thank you so much, John, for talking with me today about the film. Fans, if you want to see They Grow Up So Fast, you can check it on Tribeca at Home. It's still streaming, I think, until July 2nd. And you can still check it out there. Check it out. Film festivals, follow him on social media. I'm sure you'll be posting where your film is going to be next, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah, we have an Instagram page at They Grow Up So Fast Film. And my page is at John F. Beach. So we'll keep you updated.